In the final months of Elizabeth I's reign, the aging queen, often referred to as the Virgin Queen, displayed signs of physical decline that would alarm even the most seasoned observers of the Elizabethan court, as her appearance had noticeably changed from the vigorous and radiant young monarch of her earlier years to a frailer figure, whose movements were slower and whose face bore the subtle marks of time and disease, suggesting that the cumulative effects of decades of stress, poor nutrition, and the absence of effective medical interventions were finally taking their toll. Chroniclers of the era noted that Elizabeth had become thinner, her complexion paler, and her energy markedly reduced, often confining herself to her private chambers and requiring assistance to move from one room to another, which was a stark contrast to her earlier displays of regal vitality when she would greet her subjects with poise and project, the image of unshakable strength and authority, as she knew the performance of power was as crucial as the power itself. During these months, her diet reportedly remained inconsistent, alternating between lavish feasts meant to impress visiting dignitaries and periods of eating little due to a loss of appetite, a factor which could have exacerbated existing health problems, including possible digestive issues or vitamin deficiencies, while her reliance on heavily spiced, salted, and preserved foods common in the Elizabethan diet may have contributed to more insidious conditions such as gout or kidney problems, both of which were widespread among the English elite, and compounded by her occasional consumption of alcohol as part of social or ceremonial gatherings, further straining her liver and overall metabolic health, while also considering that the medical knowledge of the time was rudimentary, with treatments often involving bleeding, purging, or the administration of herbal remedies that were not standardized and could sometimes do more harm than good. Moreover, the queen was known to suffer from periodic illnesses throughout her life, including smallpox, which left her with visible scars, and possibly influenza or typhus, whose long-term effects on an older body could be debilitating, and in her 70s, any such infection would have been a serious threat to survival, particularly in a period when epidemics could sweep through households with devastating efficiency. In addition to these physical ailments, Elizabeth endured immense psychological and emotional stress, as the weight of ruling England alone for over 4 decades meant she constantly navigated complex political and religious tensions, from threats of Spanish invasion to plots against her throne, which likely elevated her cortisol levels and weakened her immune system, thereby rendering her more vulnerable to illness, while the court around her, composed of ambitious nobles and advisors, often forced her to conceal pain or discomfort in order to maintain the perception of absolute control, which may have delayed the diagnosis or treatment of emerging health issues. Some contemporary observers described the Queen as showing signs of fatigue and mental strain, with moments of forgetfulness and difficulty focusing on matters of state, possibly hinting at cognitive decline or age-related neurological conditions such as stroke, dementia, or even the cumulative effects of repeated fevers and infections over her lifetime, a possibility that modern historians continue to debate. Given that post-mortem examinations were rare and medical records were inconsistent, finally, the broader context of Elizabeth's environment cannot be ignored, as the cold, damp, and often poorly ventilated chambers of the royal palaces combined with the crowded nature of court life, would have exposed her to various pathogens, exacerbating respiratory conditions like bronchitis or pneumonia, which, for someone of her age and constitution, could easily have become life-threatening. Thus, when considering the final months of Elizabeth I, it becomes clear that her declining health was the result of an intricate interplay of chronic physical conditions, age-related deterioration, inadequate medical interventions, lifestyle factors, and the immense psychological pressures of ruling, all of which created a scenario in which the end of one of England's most iconic reigns was not a sudden shock, but rather the culmination of a lifetime of challenges, leaving contemporaries to speculate endlessly about the exact cause, a debate that would persist through the centuries as historians attempted to piece together the fragments of evidence available from letters, diaries, ambassador reports, and medical observations, forming the basis for the many theories that now form the cornerstone of discussions about the death of Elizabeth I. In examining the final days of Elizabeth I, historians and medical researchers have long debated the precise nature of her ailments, as the sparse and often anecdotal accounts from courtiers, ambassadors, and physicians provide tantalizing but inconclusive evidence of the conditions that may have contributed to her demise, with some suggesting that her health problems were primarily age, given that she was 70 years old at the time of her death, a remarkably advanced age for the 16th century, when the average life expectancy hovered around 35 to 40 years, meaning that her body had endured decades of cumulative stress, infections, and environmental hardships that would have weakened organ function and overall resilience. Contemporaneous records indicate that she suffered from persistent digestive complaints, which could have ranged from chronic gastritis to more severe intestinal disorders, possibly exacerbated by her diet, which often relied on rich meats, heavy sauces, and imported delicacies that were not always properly preserved, as well as a heavy reliance on spices, sugar, and wine, all of which may have stressed her liver and kidneys over time, while her physicians, limited by the medical knowledge of the era, commonly employed treatments such as bloodletting, purgatives, and herbal remedies, some of which were not only ineffective but potentially harmful, further undermining her already fragile constitution. Some historians have posited that she may have suffered from pneumonia, bronchitis, or another form of respiratory illness in her final months, as reports describe her appearing pale, fatigued, and weak. And there are accounts of persistent coughs and labored breathing that suggest an underlying pulmonary problem, a dangerous condition for a woman of her age in a pre-antibiotic era, where infections could quickly turn fatal. Other theories focus on cardiovascular issues, such as congestive heart failure or hypertension, potentially aggravated by a lifetime of stress, anxiety, and grief over political crises, assassinations, and religious conflicts. As Elizabeth bore the responsibility of ruling a kingdom fraught with internal rebellion and foreign threats, from Spanish plots to Catholic uprisings, all of which would have contributed to elevated blood pressure and other stress-related illnesses. In addition, scholars have considered endocrine or metabolic conditions such as diabetes or hypothyroidism, given descriptions of weight fluctuation, fatigue, and other symptoms that align with these diseases. Though without modern diagnostic tools, such speculation remains inherently uncertain. Yet, it provides a framework for understanding how a combination of systemic, physiological decline and acute illness could have culminated in her death. It is also important to note the psychological dimensions of her condition. As Elizabeth lived under intense scrutiny and pressure for decades, maintaining a carefully curated public persona while privately navigating fears, insecurities, and the constant threat of betrayal, all of which would have taxed her nervous system and possibly contributed to psychosomatic symptoms that worsened physical conditions. While some accounts suggest she experienced insomnia or disturbed sleep, which, over months and years, could have impaired cognitive and immune function, making her body less able to cope with illness. Further complicating matters, Elizabeth's personal habits may have inadvertently contributed to her decline, as she sometimes consumed medicines and tonics prepared by court apothecaries without full knowledge of their side effects, and her reliance on these treatments may have caused interactions or toxicity, particularly given the potent herbal and chemical compounds used at the time, which could affect the liver, kidneys, and heart. While the lack of proper hydration and intermittent fasting due to appetite loss may have further strained her body, diplomatic correspondences from foreign ambassadors describe a queen who, despite declining health, insisted on maintaining appearances, attending audiences, and making ceremonial appearances, suggesting that she often concealed weakness and discomfort, a factor that may have delayed recognition of serious illness or limited the interventions available, as her physicians were constrained not only by medical knowledge, but also by social and political expectations that the monarch remain strong at all times, demonstrating the intersection of cultural norms, political power, and health outcomes in Elizabethan England. Ultimately, these factors, chronic physical ailments, age-related decline, environmental stressors, dietary influences, repeated exposure to infections, psychological strain, and medical treatments that were often more harmful than helpful, combined to create a fragile physiological state in which even a minor infection or organ failure could become catastrophic, leading many modern historians to theorize that her death was likely the result of multiple contributing factors rather than a single identifiable disease, and that the ambiguity surrounding her passing has fueled centuries of speculation and fascination, as each historian or medical expert brings new interpretations to the historical record, analyzing letters, diary entries, ambassador reports, and anecdotal accounts to reconstruct the final chapter of a monarch who ruled England with unmatched skill and whose body ultimately succumbed to the inexorable forces of age, stress, and illness in a world without the benefits of modern medicine, leaving her courtiers, citizens, and foreign observers to witness the end of an era and the passing of one of history's most enigmatic and enduring figures. As Elizabeth I's final days drew near in early March of 1603, the culmination of decades of physical decline, chronic illness, and relentless political pressure manifested in a series of alarming symptoms that were carefully noted by her attendants and chroniclers, who described a queen whose strength waned visibly, whose movements became increasingly labored, and whose once imposing presence was now shadowed by pallor and exhaustion, as she reportedly experienced a combination of fever, chills, shortness of breath, and general malaise. all of which would today suggest a severe systemic infection or perhaps complications from cardiovascular or renal disease. Yet, at the time, without modern diagnostic tools or understanding of pathogens, the precise cause of death remained speculative and was largely interpreted through the lens of Elizabethan medicine, which relied heavily on humoral theory, balancing the bodies for humors through bloodletting, purges, and herbal treatments. Interventions that were likely ineffective and may have hastened her decline. The Queen's attendants observed that she struggled to consume food, showing signs of dysphagia or loss of appetite, which, combined with years of a rich and sometimes unhealthy diet, may have weakened her further. While her inability to sleep properly and the psychological toll of governing a kingdom through decades of religious conflict, plots against her life, and the constant threat of war likely compounded the physiological strain, illustrating the complex interplay between mental stress and physical vulnerability, and highlighting the broader historical context in which her death occurred, where monarchs were both symbols of national stability and human beings susceptible to the limitations of the body. Foreign ambassadors, including those from Spain, France, and the Holy Roman Empire, documented her condition with both fascination and political anxiety, noting the Queen's frailty and speculating on her imminent demise, as her death would inevitably alter the delicate balance of European politics, raising questions about succession, the potential for civil unrest, and the future of Protestant England, which only added pressure to the court as advisors and nobles navigated the uncertain days leading up to her passing, with each visitor and attendant acutely aware that the end of Elizabeth's reign would mark a dramatic transition from the Elizabethan era to the reign of James VI of Scotland, later James I of England. The final hours of Elizabeth I reportedly involved a period of increasing weakness, during which she was attended by physicians, including Dr. William Patty, who attempted treatments consistent with contemporary medical practice. Yet none were sufficient to reverse the decline, and she eventually passed away peacefully in the evening of March 24, 1603, at Richmond Palace, her death eliciting a mixture of sorrow, relief, and speculation among those present, and the immediate aftermath saw a flurry of ceremonial preparation for the lying in state, the announcement to Parliament and foreign powers, and the transition of power to James, who was proclaimed king without dispute, ensuring a relatively smooth succession, though rumors of foul play and mystery surrounding the Queen's death circulated widely, fueled by her enigmatic life and the public's fascination with her unmarried status, political cunning, and the aura of mystique she cultivated over 4 decades of rule. Historians in subsequent centuries have analyzed the fragments of evidence letters from courtiers, ambassador reports, anecdotal medical descriptions, and early modern chronicles to hypothesize potential causes ranging from pneumonia, stroke, and cancer to complications from long-standing illnesses such as diabetes, kidney disease, or even lead poisoning from cosmetics and food preparation practices common at the time, with the multiplicity of symptoms suggesting that her death was not the result of a single cause, but rather the convergence of several chronic and acute conditions, exacerbated by age, environmental factors, psychological stress, and the limitations of contemporary medicine. While some scholars even speculate that her legendary iron constitution had been gradually worn down by decades of relentless governance and exposure to illness, stress, and diet-related complications, producing a perfect storm in which the body finally gave way, and leaving the world to mourn the passing of one of England's most iconic and complex monarchs, whose reign shaped the course of history, culture, and national identity. The legacy of Elizabeth I's death also underscores the interplay between public perception and private reality, as she was mourned as a symbol of enduring strength and wisdom. Yet her final months revealed the vulnerability of even the most formidable figures, illustrating how the human experience of aging, illness, and mortality transcends social status and historical significance, while simultaneously highlighting the difficulties historians face in reconstructing medical narratives from periods in which knowledge was limited, documentation inconsistent, and interpretation often colored by political or personal bias, ultimately leaving Elizabeth I's death as a historical puzzle that continues to intrigue scholars, medical historians, and enthusiasts of Tudor history alike, serving as both a cautionary tale about the fragility of human health in pre-modern societies and a testament to the enduring fascination with one of England's most legendary rulers. The Tudor court, a world of opulence, power, and intrigue, was simultaneously a place of remarkable influence and terrifying vulnerability to illness, where monarchs, nobles, and courtiers lived in close quarters, frequently exposed to contagious diseases, unsanitary conditions, and medical practices that were more tradition-bound than scientifically grounded, creating an environment in which the health of even the most powerful individuals was precarious at best, and where the sudden deaths of prominent figures could trigger political upheaval, as well as widespread speculation about the causes of mortality. And Elizabeth I's final years serve as a striking example of how the combination of age, chronic illness, and inadequate treatment could converge to produce a fatal outcome. The medical landscape of the Tudor period was dominated by the humoral theory, which proposed that health depended on the balance of 4 bodily fluids, and black bile. So physicians and apothecaries often prescribed remedies aimed at restoring this balance, including bleeding, purging, and the use of herbal concoctions. Yet these interventions were frequently harmful, removing vital fluids or introducing toxic substances that could weaken the patient. And while some treatments, such as poultices or ointments, may have provided minor symptomatic relief, they were rarely curative. And the lack of germ theory or understanding of infection meant that preventative care was virtually non-existent. Members of the Tudor elite, including Elizabeth herself, were constantly exposed to pathogens through crowded living conditions, infrequent bathing, and the close presence of many attendants, servants, and visitors, which made the transmission of illnesses like smallpox, influenza, typhoid, and tuberculosis nearly inevitable. While the diet of the court, rich in salted meats, preserved foods, and imported delicacies, although symbolically demonstrating wealth and sophistication, often lacked essential nutrients, contributing to deficiencies that could exacerbate vulnerability to disease, particularly among older individuals. And the excessive consumption of sugar, spices, and alcohol could further compromise health over time. While certain cosmetic practices, such as the use of lead-based makeup, may have introduced chronic toxicity with subtle but cumulative effects, doctors and apothecaries of the Tudor court, including those attending Elizabeth I and her contemporaries, relied on careful observation of symptoms, pulse taking, and urine analysis, sometimes combined with astrology and consultation of ancient texts. But these methods were limited in accuracy, leading to misdiagnosis or ineffective treatment, and patients often suffered from multiple concurrent conditions such as infections, organ failure, nutritional deficiencies, and stress-related ailments, which complicated both assessment and intervention. While certain epidemics, such as outbreaks of plague or influenza, could spread rapidly through palaces and towns alike, claiming lives indiscriminately and reinforcing the sense of vulnerability among the elite. Furthermore, the social and political pressures of court life often required rulers and courtiers to conceal illness or continue performing duties despite severe weakness. As a monarch like Elizabeth I could not appear infirm without risking perceptions of weakness that might embolden rivals or enemies, and nobles, similarly, had to maintain appearances to preserve favor and position, creating an environment in which the physical needs of individuals were subordinated to the optics of power, and where disease could be ignored or treated inadequately until it reached a critical stage, demonstrating the deadly intersection of politics, societal expectation, and medical ignorance. The Tudor period also included a fascinating array of medical curiosities, from the use of exotic herbs and imported remedies to experiments with minerals, animal parts, and mystical treatments, many of which were administered with genuine belief in their efficacy, yet often lacked empirical support. While some treatments, such as the application of mercury, antimony, or lead, could induce toxicity, causing neurological, renal, or gastrointestinal damage, which may have compounded pre-existing ailments, and when combined with inadequate nutrition, exposure to infection, and stress, created an environment in which the average lifespan of the elite was far from guaranteed, despite their wealth and status. In addition to physical maladies, the mental and emotional health of the Tudor court was frequently under strain, as political intrigue, betrayal, and the constant need to navigate alliances produced chronic stress, anxiety, and depression, which contemporary physicians often misattributed to humoral imbalances or moral failings, rather than recognizing their tangible impact on the body. Yet modern understanding suggests that these psychological factors could significantly weaken immunity, exacerbate chronic illnesses, and even contribute to acute health crises, highlighting the inseparability of mind and body in historical medical contexts. The court was also plagued by recurring epidemics, such as smallpox, measles, and typhus, diseases that could strike suddenly and lethally, leaving survivors with permanent disfigurement or organ damage, as well as generating fear and superstition, which often led to misattribution of cause, from divine punishment to witchcraft, complicating both medical treatment and historical interpretation, and illustrating the precariousness of life in Tudor England, where proximity to wealth and power did not guarantee safety, but rather often heightened exposure to risk. In sum, the medical mysteries of the Tudor court reveal a complex and precarious world in which Elizabeth I and her contemporaries navigated the fragile balance between life, illness, and the expectations of power. where chronic disease, inadequate nutrition, unsanitary conditions, harmful treatments, psychological stress, and infectious outbreaks intertwined to create an environment in which mortality was constant. And understanding these factors provides crucial context for the health challenges faced by Elizabeth I, illuminating the broader dangers faced by the English elite, the limitations of contemporary medicine, and the enduring fascination with the intersection of history, medicine, and human vulnerability in a world far removed from the advances of modern healthcare. Within the intricate and often perilous environment of the Tudor court, illnesses were both common and enigmatic. With the combination of limited medical knowledge, overcrowded living quarters, and the elaborate rituals of court life, creating a scenario in which even minor ailments could escalate into life-threatening conditions, and where the methods used to treat disease were a complex mixture of observation, superstition, and trial-and-error remedies. For example, courtiers frequently suffered from fevers, respiratory infections, gastrointestinal disturbances, and skin conditions, which were attributed not only to imbalances of humors, but sometimes to moral failings, curses, or divine punishment, reflecting the blend of medical, religious, and cultural thinking that dominated the era. While physicians of the time often prescribed treatments that modern historians view as hazardous, including purges, emetics, which were believed to restore equilibrium but frequently weakened patients by causing anemia or dehydration, and could even accelerate the progression of underlying diseases, illustrating the precariousness of healthcare in a society where science and superstition were tightly interwoven. The diets of the elite further influenced health outcomes, as nobles consumed large quantities of preserved meats, rich pastries, sugar, and alcohol, which, while demonstrating wealth and status, contributed to chronic conditions such as gout, obesity, and liver disease, with deficiencies in vitamins and minerals remaining common even among the affluent, leading to fatigue, susceptibility to infection, and delayed recovery from illness, while the reliance on imported or exotic remedies, including herbs, minerals, and animal parts, sometimes introduce toxic substances like mercury or lead into the body, causing neurological and organ damage over time, and creating a hidden layer of chronic illness that could complicate the presentation of acute disease. Hygiene and sanitation within palaces were minimal, as bathhouses were used infrequently and often only seasonally. Clothing was heavy and rarely cleaned, and rooms were crowded with attendants, servants, and visiting dignitaries, creating ideal conditions for the spread of airborne or contact-transmitted pathogens, so that outbreaks of influenza, smallpox, typhus, or plague were not only likely, but often inevitable. And the mortality rates, even among the elite, were surprisingly high given their resources, as proximity to power and privilege did not protect against the virulence of disease, while the social and political pressures of court life required sick nobles and monarchs alike to conceal symptoms to avoid appearing weak, forcing individuals to endure illness in public while their private suffering went largely unnoticed or misdiagnosed. Chronic conditions, such as gout or arthritis, were exacerbated by both diet and lifestyle, as the Tudor nobility often led sedentary lives, attended feasts and ceremonies, and wore restrictive clothing, further contributing to joint stiffness, inflammation, and pain. While mental health was similarly compromised, as stress, grief, paranoia, and anxiety were endemic within a court characterized by intrigue, shifting alliances, and the ever-present threat of political downfall or violence. And although physicians sometimes attempted calming treatments such as herbal infusions or aromatic therapy, these interventions were limited in efficacy, highlighting the interconnectedness of physical and psychological well-being in historical contexts. Infectious diseases were particularly devastating, as smallpox, measles, and plague could spread rapidly among densely populated palaces, often killing indiscriminately, leaving survivors disfigured or causing long-term organ damage. And while the court implemented some preventive measures, such as quarantining the sick or using perfumes to cleanse the air, these efforts were largely symbolic rather than effective, reinforcing the perception that the elite were constantly under threat despite their social advantage. While the close attention paid to the health of monarchs and key figures reflected both the political necessity of maintaining continuity of power and the fragility of human life, as the death of a ruler or heir could provoke instability, succession crises, or even civil unrest, a reality that influenced the treatment of illness and the urgency with which medical interventions were attempted. The record of Elizabeth I's contemporaries provides insight into how these vulnerabilities manifested, with reports noting her attendants' concern over fevers, chills, digestive problems, and weakness in her final months, all of which could correspond to a variety of underlying conditions, including chronic infections, kidney or liver disease, cardiovascular decline, or complications from malnutrition and age-related degeneration. While the ambiguity of symptoms and the limitations of medical practice prevented definitive diagnosis, leaving chroniclers and later historians to speculate about what ultimately led to her death. Reflecting the broader challenges faced by Tudor medical practitioners and the courtly elite alike, ultimately, the illnesses, treatments, and vulnerabilities of the Tudor court illustrate a society caught between the symbolic power of wealth, status, and appearance, and the harsh biological realities of disease, aging, and inadequate medical knowledge, revealing a world in which life was precarious regardless of rank, where chronic disease and acute illness could rapidly alter political landscapes, and where the experience of figures like Elizabeth I highlights the enduring tension between human fragility and the performance of power, providing a lens through which modern historians can understand the limitations, challenges, and occasional tragedies of medical life in the Elizabethan era, and offering a compelling backdrop for understanding how the final months of Elizabeth I were shaped not just by her age or personal habits, but by the broader environment of disease, treatment, and social expectation that defined the Tudor court. As the Tudor court progressed through Elizabeth I's reign, the combination of chronic illness, limited medical understanding, and the prevalence of infectious disease resulted in numerous notable deaths, while simultaneously highlighting the mysterious nature of health in early modern England. As courtiers, diplomats, and historians alike attempted to interpret the causes of death through observation, rumor, and the framework of humoral theory, a system that sought to explain disease through the balance of blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile, but which often masked the true physiological or infectious nature of illnesses. Members of the court frequently succumbed to ailments that modern medicine might classify as respiratory infections, pneumonia, tuberculosis, or influenza, as well as gastrointestinal disorders, kidney or liver disease, and cardiovascular complications. Yet contemporaries interpreted these conditions through symbolic and moral lenses, attributing deaths to divine judgment, temperament imbalances, or even subtle poisonings, a reflection of the pervasive intrigue and suspicion that defined life at the heart of English power, and illustrating how health, politics, and superstition were intertwined in ways that could confuse diagnosis and treatment, and intensify anxiety among courtiers. The death of Mary, Queen of Scots, though occurring prior to Elizabeth's own decline, remained a lingering reminder of the dangers of political and familial rivalries, as the combination of imprisonment, psychological stress, and reported health decline exemplified the physical toll of prolonged anxiety and confinement. While the deaths of high-ranking courtiers, such as Robert Dudley or William Cecil, and even lesser-known nobles, often sparked speculation about hidden poisons or conspiracies, despite the probable involvement of age, chronic disease, and infectious illness, reflecting the court's atmosphere of suspicion and the limitations of contemporary medical knowledge, where sudden or unexplained deaths could not easily be separated from politics and rumor, and where the uncertainty surrounding health outcomes created both fear and fascination for those who remained. Physicians of the era, including Elizabeth's personal doctors, attempted to navigate this treacherous environment by offering remedies that ranged from carefully prepared herbal infusions to bloodletting, purging, and other interventions aimed at restoring humoral balance. Yet these treatments were often inconsistently applied, their efficacy variable at best, and sometimes harmful, while apothecaries experimented with more exotic ingredients, including mercury, lead, and animal-derived compounds, which could introduce chronic toxicity over time, exacerbating existing conditions and complicating recovery, a dynamic that underscores the precariousness of life, even for those at the pinnacle of wealth and status, and highlights the difference between perceived medical authority and actual physiological outcomes, while also illustrating why many deaths remained mysterious or seemingly inexplicable to contemporaries and later historians alike. The court was also highly vulnerable to epidemics, such as plague outbreaks that periodically swept through London and the royal residences, killing indiscriminately and striking fear into the hearts of the population, while measures such as isolation of the sick, fumigation of rooms, and ritual cleansing of spaces, though well-intentioned, were largely ineffective in preventing the spread of disease, demonstrating the limitations of public health interventions in an era before germ theory, and contributing to the high mortality rate among courtiers, servants, and even members of the royal family, while creating a constant backdrop of anxiety, uncertainty, and superstition that permeated daily life. The deaths of individuals like Elizabeth's close advisors, nobles, or visiting diplomats often prompted elaborate speculation in letters, diaries, and ambassador reports, with each observer interpreting the cause of death through a combination of medical observation, social expectation, and political agenda. leading to a tangled historical record in which truth, rumor, and interpretation overlap. While modern historians attempt to reconstruct events through careful analysis of symptom descriptions, contemporaneous commentary, and known environmental and lifestyle factors, resulting in a complex picture in which age-related decline, chronic illness, infection, diet, stress, and even cosmetic practices such as lead-based makeup all potentially played a role, making the final outcome of life in the Tudor court both inevitable and unpredictable. The broader significance of these deaths lies not only in the individual tragedies, but also in the insights they provide into Elizabethan society, demonstrating how the interplay of medicine, culture, politics, and environment shaped mortality, and how health crises could affect succession, governance, and diplomacy, while simultaneously leaving a rich historical record for modern analysis, with Elizabeth I's own decline and death serving as a pinnacle example of these forces converging, highlighting the fragility of even the most powerful bodies and the limits of contemporary understanding, while underscoring the timeless human struggle against illness and mortality. In conclusion, the medical mysteries of the Tudor court offer a fascinating window into a world in which disease, superstition, and politics were inextricably linked, where the deaths of notable figures illuminated both the limitations of knowledge and the vulnerabilities inherent to human life, and where Elizabeth I's final years exemplify the cumulative effects of age, chronic illness, environmental exposure, dietary habits, psychological stress, and rudimentary medical practice, leaving modern historians to navigate a complex web of evidence, speculation, and context to piece together the health challenges of one of history's most enigmatic and enduring monarchs. While the fascination with these medical mysteries continues to captivate those interested in the intersection of history, medicine, and human experience, providing both insight and intrigue in equal measure, the diet of Elizabeth I and her court, a cornerstone of both social identity and physical well-being, played a pivotal role in shaping the health, longevity, and vulnerabilities of the English elite, revealing how food was as much a marker of status as a source of sustenance, with meals designed to impress foreign dignitaries and reinforce political alliances, often containing an abundance of meat, sugar, spices, and imported delicacies that were rich, heavily salted, and sometimes preserved for long periods, which, while visually and symbolically impressive, created both immediate and long-term effects on the body, contributing to conditions such as gout, obesity, liver disease, and cardiovascular strain, particularly in aging courtiers and monarchs like Elizabeth I, whose metabolism and resilience were increasingly challenged by the cumulative burden of decades of high-calorie, nutrient-poor consumption. Records of court feasts indicate a preference for roasted meats, including beef, venison, and poultry, often accompanied by rich sauces and heavy use of butter or cream, alongside breads, pastries, and puddings sweetened with sugar that was becoming increasingly accessible due to England's expanding trade networks. While fish, a dietary staple for certain religious observances, was frequently salted or dried for preservation, providing protein but also introducing high levels of sodium, which could exacerbate hypertension or renal strain. a significant concern for an aging population already vulnerable to chronic illness, and further complicated by alcohol consumption, including wine, beer, and spiced mead, which was ubiquitous at court gatherings and could impair liver function, digestion, and sleep quality, creating a cumulative effect that weakened physical resilience. Vegetables and fruits were less emphasized in the diet of the elite, often limited to seasonal or imported items that were expensive and less accessible, meaning deficiencies in essential vitamins and minerals were common, potentially leading to fatigue, weakened immunity, or delayed recovery from illness, while the lack of fresh produce also contributed to scurvy and other nutritional disorders, particularly during the winter months or long journeys between residences, when reliance on preserved foods increased, and when the monotony of diet could exacerbate digestive problems, discomfort, and long-term organ strain, creating a subtle but persistent threat to overall health, a vulnerability that would have been compounded by the limited understanding of hygiene and food safety at the time, as meat could be undercooked or contaminated, while storage methods were rudimentary, further increasing the risk of gastrointestinal illness. Elizabeth's personal eating habits, as reported by ambassadors and courtiers, reflected both the ceremonial demands of her position and her own preferences, as she often consumed small portions compared to the massive feasts presented at court, perhaps due to declining appetite in her later years, though she maintained the appearances of abundance, ensuring that state occasions displayed the opulence expected of an English monarch, while also adhering to some ritualized aspects of consumption, such as fasting during religious observances or the controlled timing of meals to regulate energy and maintain discipline, reflecting both cultural expectations and an understanding of moderation that may have had subtle protective effects on her health, though likely insufficient to counterbalance decades of heavy, rich, and inconsistent nutrition. Medicinal use of foods and beverages was also common, as certain fruits and wines were believed to have restorative properties, and Elizabeth's apothecaries often prepared tonics, infusions, and medicinal broths to support digestion, boost vitality, or treat specific ailments. Yet the efficacy of these remedies was limited by the rudimentary understanding of disease mechanisms, and some preparations may have been toxic due to high concentrations of herbs, minerals, or alcohol, adding a layer of complexity to her nutritional health, while also reflecting the broader Elizabethan approach to medicine, in which diet and medicine were intertwined, with food functioning as both sustenance and therapeutic intervention. The social dimension of food at court cannot be overlooked, as dining was a public and highly ritualized act, demonstrating hierarchy, hospitality, and political sophistication, and the expectation to partake in elaborate meals could place physical demands on individuals, particularly those with digestive or metabolic vulnerabilities. While the ceremonial nature of feasts often emphasized display over moderation, reinforcing the tension between appearance and health, a theme that resonated throughout Elizabeth's reign, where presentation of power was paramount, sometimes at the cost of personal well-being, and where the intersection of diet, lifestyle, and social expectation directly influenced the physical condition of both monarch and court. Further, Elizabeth's extensive travel between royal palaces, Her participation in long ceremonies and the pressures of daily governance meant that her opportunities for physical exercise were limited, while her clothing, often elaborate and restrictive, hindered mobility, increased heat retention, and imposed additional physiological strain, highlighting how lifestyle factors beyond diet, sedentary behavior, constrained movement, and stress interacted with nutrition to shape her overall health, while also illustrating how the environment of the court itself, with its crowded spaces, limited sanitation, and ceremonial obligations, created both social cohesion and continuous physical and psychological stress, influencing digestion, sleep, immune response, and energy levels, all of which contributed to vulnerability to illness, age-related decline, and eventual mortality. In sum, the diet and lifestyle of Elizabeth I and her court demonstrate a complex interplay of wealth, power, culture, and physiology, revealing that the very foods and rituals that symbolized authority and sophistication also carried hidden risks to health, while providing insight into the broader challenges of sustaining vitality and resilience in a historical context, where knowledge of nutrition, hygiene, and preventive medicine was limited, where social expectation often trumped personal well-being, and where the cumulative effects of decades of diet, lifestyle, and environmental exposure would ultimately shape the final years of a monarch whose life and reign continue to captivate historians, medical researchers, and enthusiasts of the Elizabethan era, offering a vivid illustration of how food, culture, and power converge to influence human health across the spectrum of physical, social, and political life. Beyond the composition of her diet, Elizabeth I's daily habits and routines, as well as the environmental conditions of her various residences, played a critical role in shaping her health, highlighting the complex interaction between lifestyle, physical well-being, and the pressures of monarchical life, as her day-to-day existence required a careful balance between ceremonial obligations, personal preference, and practical limitations of early modern living, with each factor influencing her energy levels, resilience, and susceptibility to illness. The Queen's typical schedule often began with early rising, attendance to private prayers, and consultations with advisors or physicians, followed by audiences, meetings, and receptions, which, though relatively sedentary compared to manual labor, nonetheless demanded prolonged periods of standing, formal posture, and constant attention to social etiquette, all of which could exacerbate fatigue, particularly as she aged, while the wearing of heavy, ornate gowns, corsets, ruffs, and layers of clothing, often incorporating stiffened materials and intricate embroidery, restricted movement, increased heat retention, and placed additional strain on circulation, illustrating how clothing choices, dictated by status and cultural expectation, could have subtle but cumulative impacts on physical health over time, including contributing to respiratory restriction, musculoskeletal discomfort, and digestive strain. Hygiene practices, though modestly improved by Elizabethan standards, remained limited, as bathing was infrequent, sometimes seasonal, and often replaced with perfumed cloths, powders, and scented oils intended to mask odors rather than provide true sanitation. While her residences, including palaces like Whitehall, Richmond, and Greenwich, were characterized by large, poorly ventilated chambers, wooden floors, tapestries, and crowded quarters, creating conditions conducive to the spread of respiratory infections, lice, and other parasites, while open hearths and smoke contributed to poor air quality, exacerbating respiratory strain and increasing the risk of long-term pulmonary complications, particularly for an aging monarch with chronic vulnerabilities. The Queen's routines also reflected careful attention to social and political performance, requiring prolonged periods of ceremonial participation, state audiences, and public appearances, often necessitating fasting, controlled eating, or restricted mobility, which could compromise nutrition, digestion, and energy reserves, while periods of stress, whether arising from political crises, diplomatic negotiations, or threats of rebellion, likely elevated cortisol levels, weakened immunity, and intensified chronic conditions, including hypertension, cardiovascular strain, and digestive disturbances, illustrating the tangible physiological impact of sustained psychological and emotional stress, as well as the inability of Elizabethan medicine to address such complex interactions between body and mind. Sleeping habits, though less documented, appear to have been disrupted by the demands of the court, with interruptions for correspondence, audiences, and nighttime duties, as well as a reliance on beds that, while opulent, offered limited ergonomic support by modern standards, contributing to musculoskeletal discomfort and suboptimal restorative sleep, which, compounded over years, could impair cognitive function, immune response, and metabolic regulation, further weakening resilience against acute illness, infection, and chronic degenerative conditions. Travel, both for political purposes and leisure, introduced additional health challenges as Elizabeth and her court frequently moved between palaces, sometimes across long distances in uncomfortable carriages or on horseback, exposing her to cold, damp, and drafty conditions that could exacerbate respiratory illness or joint pain, while the necessity of maintaining elaborate appearances during such travel increased stress and fatigue and reduced opportunities for rest or dietary consistency, further demonstrating the interplay between lifestyle, environment, and vulnerability. The reliance on physicians and apothecaries for daily or periodic interventions reflected both the Queen's awareness of her own frailty and the limitations of contemporary medical knowledge, with treatments ranging from herbal tonics, poultices, and ointments to bloodletting and purging, sometimes administered prophylactically and sometimes in response to emerging illness, yet frequently of uncertain efficacy and occasionally harmful, highlighting the precarious nature of health management within the Tudor court, where remedies were guided by theory, tradition, and observation rather than empirical understanding, and where the consequences of misjudged treatments could accelerate decline, particularly in the context of chronic age-related vulnerabilities. In addition to physical and environmental factors, psychological and emotional considerations were ever present, as Elizabeth's position demanded constant vigilance, strategic thinking, and careful management of relationships, both domestic and international, which created chronic low-level stress capable of suppressing immune function, contributing to insomnia, digestive irregularities, and other psychosomatic manifestations, while social isolation, loss of close confidants, and awareness of mortality in her later years may have further compounded these effects, illustrating how the psychological demands of power intersected with the physiological realities of aging, diet, and environment, creating a holistic framework through which her health can be understood. In conclusion, Elizabeth I's habits, routines, and environmental context reveal a multifaceted web of influences on health, encompassing posture, clothing, hygiene, sleep, travel, ceremonial obligations, psychological stress, and the physical spaces of palaces, all of which interacted with diet, chronic illness, and medical intervention to shape the trajectory of her vitality and decline, highlighting the inseparability of lifestyle, environment, and social expectation in understanding historical health outcomes, and offering a compelling perspective on how the demands of monarchy, coupled with Elizabethan material culture and medical limitations, created conditions in which even the most powerful and celebrated ruler remained subject to the vulnerabilities of human physiology, ultimately setting the stage for the final declining years that preceded her death, while providing modern readers with a detailed lens into the lived experience, environmental pressures, and daily management of health in the Elizabethan court. In addition to diet, routines, and environmental conditions, Elizabeth I and her court engaged in a variety of health rituals and lifestyle practices designed to maintain vitality, appearance, and energy, reflecting the early modern understanding of the body as a delicate balance of humors, temperament, and external influences, and illustrating how cultural, social, and political pressures intersected with physiological concerns, as even a monarch of formidable intellect and resilience could be subject to the vulnerabilities imposed by age, chronic stress, and environmental exposure. The Queen reportedly adhered to specific daily regimens that included ceremonial washing, application of perfumed oils and powders, and the careful selection of clothing and jewelry, all intended not only to maintain hygiene and beauty according to contemporary standards, but also to promote health by stimulating circulation, preserving warmth, and warding off putative miasmas thought to carry disease, while her attendants assisted with these rituals to ensure precision and adherence, recognizing that deviations could affect both appearance and well-being, though modern interpretations suggest that such practices, while symbolically important, had limited effectiveness against the real physiological threats posed by infectious disease, nutritional deficiency, and age-related decline. Gentle forms of exercise, such as walking within palace gardens, riding in enclosed courtyards, and light dance or stretching during court entertainments, were prescribed or encouraged to improve circulation, maintain flexibility, and support digestive function. Yet these activities were often constrained by the Queen's heavy, ornate gowns and restrictive corsetry, which limited mobility, contributed to musculoskeletal discomfort, and placed additional strain on posture and respiration. While the demands of ceremonial life frequently interrupted or replaced exercise, illustrating the tension between prescribed health practices and the practicalities of monarchical performance, and demonstrating how even well-intentioned efforts to maintain physical condition were undermined by social expectation and cultural norms. The consumption of herbal remedies, tonics, and medicinal infusions formed another aspect of Elizabethan health culture, with ingredients such as rosemary, sage, lavender, and other botanicals believed to strengthen the body, improve circulation, calm nerves, or support digestion, often combined with wine or honey to enhance palatability and purported efficacy, while apothecaries sometimes included minerals or exotic compounds whose effects were unpredictable, demonstrating both the ingenuity and the limitations of Tudor pharmacology, as well as the degree to which health was understood as a combination of diet, ritual, and external intervention rather than scientific treatment, highlighting the precariousness of sustaining longevity in a world without germ theory, sterilization, or modern nutrition. Sleep, rest, and timing of activities were also considered crucial for health, with Elizabeth reportedly following structured patterns of waking and retiring, sometimes accompanied by light reading, prayer, or conversation with attendants to calm the mind, as mental tranquility was believed to support physical balance and prevent humoral disturbance. Yet political crises, extended audiences, and ceremonial obligations often disrupted these patterns, leading to cumulative fatigue, impaired immune function, and a reduced capacity to recover from minor illness. While her chronic engagement with political strategy and diplomacy added ongoing psychological strain, which modern studies suggest would have interacted negatively with cardiovascular, digestive, and neurological health, further complicating the management of vitality in her later years. The Queen's exposure to environmental conditions, drafty halls, cold winters, damp chambers, and variable heating also impacted health, particularly in terms of respiratory vulnerability and joint stiffness. While travel between palaces and engagements in outdoor processions introduced additional stressors, including fatigue, temperature extremes, and irregular meals, all of which compounded pre-existing conditions and illustrated the interplay between lifestyle, environmental exposure, and the aging body. As Elizabeth navigated a courtly life that demanded constant attention to appearances, protocol, and social hierarchy, leaving little room for personal comfort or bodily care according to modern standards. Social and ceremonial obligations imposed both psychological and physiological challenges, as Elizabeth had to project authority, wisdom, and energy even when physically weakened, necessitating controlled posture, careful speech, and the maintenance of composure, all while contending with illness, fatigue, or discomfort, which may have led to stress-induced exacerbation of chronic disease, digestive issues, and insomnia, creating a cycle in which public performance both masked and amplified the underlying vulnerabilities of her body, demonstrating the inextricable link between social expectation and health in early modern monarchical life. Cumulatively, the diet, routines, environmental conditions, exercise, and health rituals of Elizabeth I illustrate the intricate ways in which lifestyle directly influenced physical resilience, susceptibility to disease, and longevity, providing modern historians with insight into the multifactorial causes of her decline, as well as a broader understanding of how Elizabethan elites managed or struggled to manage the balance between appearance, ceremonial duties, and real physiological needs, while highlighting the limits of contemporary medical knowledge and the enduring fascination with the daily lived experience of one of England's most iconic monarchs, whose health, habits, and lifestyle choices provide a detailed and instructive window into the human challenges of sustaining vitality, dignity, and authority in a complex and demanding social environment, ultimately setting the stage for the final chapter of her life in which the cumulative effects of diet, stress, chronic illness, environmental exposure, and medical limitations converged to bring an end to a remarkable reign, leaving a legacy both in governance and in the historical record of health, human vulnerability, and the intersection of power and the body. Elizabeth's health and longevity were deeply intertwined with the immense political responsibilities she bore, as the burden of ruling England during a time of religious tension, international intrigue, and domestic factionalism placed extraordinary psychological and physiological stress on the monarch. And modern analysis suggests that the chronic activation of stress responses over decades could have contributed significantly to her physical decline, influencing cardiovascular health, immune function, digestion, sleep, and overall resilience. With her ability to manage conflict, maintain authority, and respond decisively to crises requiring both mental acuity and sustained energy, a combination that inevitably taxed the body over the course of her 45-year reign. From the outset of her rule, Elizabeth faced the challenge of establishing legitimacy in a kingdom still recovering from the religious upheavals of her father, Henry VIII, and half-siblings Edward VI and Mary I, navigating between Protestant and Catholic factions, while simultaneously deterring foreign powers such as Spain, France, and the papacy from undermining English sovereignty, a task that required constant vigilance, careful diplomacy, and strategic use of public image, all of which imposed cognitive and emotional demands that likely triggered stress-related physiological responses, including elevated cortisol levels, increased blood pressure, and disruption of normal sleep and digestion patterns, demonstrating how political stress directly intersected with physical health in a pre-modern context. The threat of conspiracies, assassination plots, and rebellion further amplified the intensity of Elizabeth's daily psychological load, as the Queen was aware that any lapse in judgment or display of vulnerability could embolden rivals, destabilize the court, or undermine public confidence, leading her to carefully manage appearance, demeanor, and communication in all public and private interactions, while also relying on a trusted inner circle of advisors, spies, and attendants to monitor potential threats, a constant mental vigilance that, while politically necessary, contributed to fatigue, anxiety, and cumulative physiological stress, affecting heart function, immune resilience, and the body's ability to recover from illness. Elizabeth's interactions with her Privy Council, Parliament, and foreign envoys required a combination of acute mental concentration, rapid decision-making, and performance of authority, often under circumstances where information was incomplete, ambiguous, or intentionally misleading, meaning that the Queen had to continuously evaluate risk, negotiate outcomes, and maintain a calm exterior despite high-stakes uncertainty, a dynamic that modern research associates with chronic sympathetic nervous system activation, leading to cardiovascular strain, insomnia, digestive issues, and long-term vulnerability to infection or organ dysfunction, highlighting the tangible link between psychological burden and physical health outcomes. Religious tensions, including the threat of Catholic plots and the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, as well as periodic threats from Spain and internal uprisings, added layers of moral, political, and existential stress that required Elizabeth to make decisions with profound consequences for life, security, and the kingdom's stability. A cognitive load that would have produced sustained stress responses and further affected her endocrine and immune systems, while also necessitating prolonged periods of attention, ceremonial engagement, and strategic thinking, often at the expense of rest, nutrition, or physical recuperation, illustrating the trade-offs inherent in leadership under extreme pressure. The Queen's skill in balancing appearances with actual political maneuvering required her to adopt careful rituals, maintain a consistent public persona, and conceal weakness or discomfort, creating a situation in which even subtle physical decline could be masked by posture, clothing, and oratory. Yet the underlying physiological stress accumulated unnoticed, contributing to chronic fatigue, exacerbation of pre-existing ailments, and the gradual deterioration of organ systems, a phenomenon modern medicine recognizes as the cumulative burden of stress on aging populations. Psychological pressure was also amplified by personal relationships, courtly expectations, and the dynamics of succession. As Elizabeth's unmarried status and decision to remain the Virgin Queen were as much political calculations as personal choices, affecting diplomacy, inheritance, and alliances, while simultaneously subjecting her to intense scrutiny, gossip, and pressure from courtiers and foreign envoys, creating an environment in which social cognition, emotional regulation, and constant evaluation of risk were indispensable, yet mentally exhausting, producing stress-induced physiological effects, including impaired digestion, hormonal imbalance, and weakened immunity, which in turn could exacerbate age-related vulnerability and contribute to acute illness. In addition, the unpredictability of external threats, such as invasions, plots, or diplomatic crises, meant that Elizabeth had to maintain high vigilance continuously, a psychological load that likely interacted with her diet, exercise, sleep, and environmental conditions to influence resilience, illustrating how multiple lifestyle and environmental factors combined with political stress to affect her overall health, while providing modern historians with insight into the ways leadership, anxiety, and cognitive load can have direct physiological consequences, particularly when sustained over decades, and highlighting the delicate balance between mental fortitude and bodily vulnerability in a pre-modern context. In conclusion, the political stress and weight of governance experienced by Elizabeth I exemplify how chronic psychological demands, cognitive strain, and the constant requirement to maintain authority and composure exerted a profound influence on her health, interacting with lifestyle, diet, environment, and medical limitations to shape her resilience, susceptibility to disease, and eventual decline, providing a multi-dimensional lens through which to understand the convergence of mental and physical factors in historical mortality, and offering insight into how one of England's most iconic rulers managed, endured, and ultimately was affected by the relentless pressures of power, authority, and responsibility throughout her remarkable reign. The prolonged psychological and political pressures experienced by Elizabeth I had profound implications for her physical and cognitive health, as sustained stress can directly influence cardiovascular function, immune response, metabolic regulation, and neural processing. And in the context of Elizabeth's late reign, decades of constant vigilance, high stakes, and emotional labor likely produced chronic physiological strain that manifested subtly over time, contributing to fatigue, digestive disorders, headaches, and susceptibility to infectious or degenerative disease, while also potentially impacting cognitive function, memory, and decision-making efficiency, creating a complex interplay between the demands of leadership and the limitations of the human body. Elizabeth's cognitive load was immense, as she continually processed intelligence reports, correspondence from foreign powers, petitions from domestic subjects, and advice from her Privy Council, often making rapid, high-impact decisions in the absence of complete or reliable information, a form of mental exertion that modern neuroscience links to sustained activation of the prefrontal cortex, increased cortisol production, and eventual cognitive wear, all of which could contribute to both mental fatigue and subtle physical manifestations, including sleep disruption, digestive irregularities, and immune compromise, demonstrating how elite political responsibility directly intersects with human physiology. The occurrence of stress-related illnesses at the Tudor court, including cardiovascular strain, hypertension, migraine, and gastrointestinal upset, reflects the physiological consequences of long-term exposure to high-stakes decision-making, chronic vigilance, and emotional tension, all of which were compounded by social expectation, ceremonial duties, and the Queen's need to project composure and authority, often masking discomfort or fatigue from both courtiers and physicians, while simultaneously generating internal wear on bodily systems that would have contributed to declining resilience and increasing vulnerability to acute or chronic disease, creating a cumulative burden that became increasingly apparent in Elizabeth's later years. Cognitive strain also intersected with emotional stress, as Elizabeth navigated succession concerns, factional rivalries, and the constant threat of espionage or insurrection, requiring her to maintain vigilance, strategic foresight, and nuanced judgment, while simultaneously regulating emotional displays and interpersonal interactions, a combination that modern research associates with chronic sympathetic nervous system activation, elevated cortisol levels, and impairment of executive functions, all of which contribute to age-related decline, sleep disturbances, and weakened immunity, demonstrating the inseparability of psychological and physiological factors in historical figures. The Queen's ability to compartmentalize stress and maintain functionality was remarkable, yet even her formidable resilience could not fully counteract the cumulative impact of decades of high-pressure leadership, with subtle indicators of decline noted in the records of courtiers and foreign ambassadors, including descriptions of fatigue, pallor, reduced mobility, and occasional lapses in attention or decision-making, which may reflect both normal aging and stress-induced cognitive wear, while also illustrating the limitations of Tudor medicine in identifying, preventing, or treating stress-related health issues, as mental strain was largely understood in moral or humoral terms rather than physiological ones, leaving the body and mind vulnerable to the consequences of chronic exertion. The interaction between chronic psychological stress and pre-existing conditions further complicated Elizabeth's health, as nutritional deficiencies, musculoskeletal strain from ceremonial dress, limited physical activity, and environmental exposures created a baseline of vulnerability, onto which the stress-induced physiological changes such as elevated blood pressure, impaired digestion, and weakened immune response were, producing a multifactorial scenario in which both chronic and acute illness could arise unexpectedly, and where even minor infections or organ stress could precipitate significant decline, illustrating the precariousness of health in high-pressure environments without modern medical intervention. Sleep disruption, often resulting from late-night consultations, audience obligations, or anxiety related to political crises, exacerbated both cognitive and physical decline, as poor restorative rest impairs memory consolidation, neural repair, immune function, and metabolic regulation, creating a feedback loop in which stress produces physiological vulnerability, which then heightens susceptibility to further stress. A dynamic likely operative in the later years of Elizabeth's reign, and one that modern chronobiology confirms as a critical determinant of overall health, longevity, and disease resistance. Ultimately, the combination of cognitive load, emotional stress, environmental exposure, diet, and lifestyle factors created a scenario in which Elizabeth's mental and physical systems were simultaneously taxed, with stress-related illnesses serving as both a symptom and a mechanism of cumulative decline, and with the physiological consequences of chronic political responsibility evident in the documented signs of fatigue, pallor, digestive disturbances, and general malaise that preceded her final illness, illustrating how the intersection of governance, cognition, and bodily function provides a crucial lens for understanding historical mortality, the lived experience of monarchs, and the subtle yet profound ways in which human physiology responds to sustained psychological demand. In conclusion, the stress-related illnesses and cognitive strain experienced by Elizabeth I underscore the inseparability of mind and body in historical health, highlighting how chronic political pressure, high cognitive load, and emotional vigilance can exacerbate vulnerabilities imposed by age, chronic disease, diet, and environmental exposure, and providing modern readers and historians with a nuanced framework for understanding how psychological stress contributed to her decline, influenced her final months, and shaped the historical narrative of one of England's most iconic rulers, whose health, resilience, and ultimate mortality were inseparable from the extraordinary demands of governance and the enduring pressures of monarchical life. The final years of Elizabeth I's reign revealed the profound cumulative effects of decades of political, psychological, and environmental stress on her physical and cognitive health, as the interplay of chronic fatigue, cognitive load, emotional strain, age-related decline, dietary factors, and repeated exposure to illness and harsh environmental conditions coalesced into a scenario in which even her remarkable resilience could not fully compensate, ultimately setting the stage for her final illness and death, a process that illuminates the intricate connections between mind, body, and the relentless demands of monarchical life in the late Tudor period. By the late 1590s and early 1600s, contemporary accounts described the Queen as increasingly frail, with visible signs of fatigue, pallor, diminished mobility, and occasional lapses in attention or energy. reflecting not only the natural consequences of advancing age, but also the cumulative burden of chronic stressors, including long-standing vigilance against political threats, constant engagement with courtly and foreign affairs, and the ongoing psychological demands of maintaining authority, appearances, and social control over a highly factionalized and politically charged environment, while simultaneously balancing the ceremonial and social expectations of Elizabethan court life, all of which placed persistent strain on cardiovascular, endocrine, digestive, and immune systems, and compounded the vulnerability imposed by age-related physiological decline. Dietary factors, which had long provided both sustenance and status, continued to influence her resilience, as decades of high-fat, high-sugar, heavily salted, and nutritionally imbalanced meals, coupled with intermittent periods of ceremonial fasting or restriction, had likely contributed to metabolic strain, gout, cardiovascular stress, and organ wear, effects that were exacerbated by the limited physical activity imposed by ceremonial dress, sedentary governance, and restricted movement, while her reliance on herbal remedies, medicinal infusions, and occasional bloodletting, though well-intentioned, may have introduced toxic or harmful effects, cumulatively weakening physiological reserves and impairing the body's ability to respond to acute illness. Environmental exposures also played a crucial role, as Elizabeth navigated drafty palaces, poorly ventilated chambers, and seasonal extremes, often with limited protection against cold, damp, or heat, which could exacerbate respiratory vulnerability, joint stiffness, and musculoskeletal strain, while long travels, outdoor appearances, and processions placed additional physical demands on a body already compromised by age, stress, and chronic conditions, reinforcing the cumulative toll of lifestyle and environmental factors on overall health, and illustrating how pre-modern leaders were intimately exposed to the hazards of their surroundings, despite wealth, power, and status, the constant cognitive and emotional demands of governance, including the careful monitoring of plots, rebellions, foreign threats, succession concerns, and courtly intrigue, further amplified physiological decline, as chronic sympathetic nervous system activation, sustained cortisol elevation, and disrupted sleep cycles collectively weakened immunity, impaired digestion, and created vulnerability to infection or organ stress, while the requirement to maintain composure and conceal weakness prevented natural recuperation, producing a scenario in which the body's defenses were continuously taxed, the mind remained perpetually alert, and minor perturbations could rapidly escalate into significant health crises. In her final months, historical accounts suggest the emergence of fever, weakness, and pallor, accompanied by diminished appetite and fatigue, reflecting both acute illness and the accumulated consequences of lifelong physiological stress, nutritional imbalances, and environmental exposures, with the precise etiology of her death remaining a matter of historical speculation, yet likely involving a combination of age-related organ decline, infection, and cumulative stress-related vulnerability, rather than a single catastrophic event, highlighting the complex interplay of factors that shape mortality in the absence of modern medical intervention, while providing insight into the lived experience of the Queen's final days, in which social expectation, ceremonial obligation, and personal resilience intersected with the inexorable effects of biological aging and chronic stress. The transition to James I, who succeeded Elizabeth without civil upheaval, underscores the significance of her prolonged leadership, as her careful management of political alliances, succession diplomacy, and courtly relations mitigated potential instability. Yet the smooth transfer of power also marks the end of a reign in which the cumulative physical and psychological pressures of sovereignty ultimately manifested in mortality, illustrating the intimate connection between governance, health, and historical outcomes, and providing a lens through which to understand the human costs of prolonged political responsibility. In conclusion, the cumulative impact of chronic stress, political responsibility, environmental exposure, diet, and lifestyle on Elizabeth I's final years demonstrates how interconnected physiological, cognitive, and social factors determine health outcomes, particularly in the absence of modern medicine, nutrition, or preventive care, offering modern readers a nuanced perspective on the pressures of monarchical life, the vulnerabilities inherent to the human body under prolonged strain, and the ways in which resilience, skill, and social strategy may sustain life and governance, yet ultimately cannot override the cumulative effects of aging, chronic stress, and environmental challenge, providing a compelling and instructive framework for understanding the final decline and death of one of history's most iconic rulers, whose life exemplifies the convergence of mind, body, and historical circumstance. The death of Elizabeth I in 1603 marked a profound turning point in English history, not only politically, but also in terms of the cultural and medical narratives surrounding the end of a monarch's life, as the sudden yet expected passing of the Virgin Queen brought decades of accumulated political, social, and personal pressures into stark relief. And historians have long examined the intersection of health, lifestyle, and governance to better understand both the circumstances of her decline and the broader implications for her succession and the English state. Elizabeth's passing prompted immediate concern among her court as physicians, attendants, and advisors observed the Queen's frailty with a mixture of alarm and solemnity, noting pallor, weakness, loss of appetite, and fluctuating fevers, while the lack of modern diagnostic tools meant that the precise cause of her death could not be determined, leaving contemporaries to attribute her decline to a combination of age, chronic illness, stress, and possibly supernatural or symbolic interpretations consistent with the beliefs of the time, reflecting how medical knowledge, superstition, and courtly ritual intertwined in the assessment of royal health, with both factual observation and cultural expectation shaping the narrative of mortality. The immediate aftermath also involved careful management of public perception, as the smooth transition to James I relied on projecting stability, continuity, and divine sanction, while acknowledging the loss of a monarch whose symbolic presence had anchored English identity, religious policy, and international diplomacy for nearly half a century. And in this context, Elizabeth's health prior to death became a subject of both practical and symbolic significance, as her visible frailty, prolonged decline, or sudden symptoms could be interpreted politically, socially, or religiously, highlighting the inseparability of corporeal reality and historical meaning. as well as the importance of the monarch's physical condition in shaping political outcomes. The observation and recording of Elizabeth's final illness also provides insight into Elizabethan medical practices. As physicians relied on humoral theory, pulse examination, purging, herbal remedies, and careful monitoring of diet and rest, while also attempting to anticipate potential crises, demonstrating the combination of empirical observation, traditional theory, and ritualized care that characterized Tudor medicine, yet simultaneously exposing the limitations of these approaches in managing complex, multifactorial health decline, particularly in the context of aging, chronic stress, and cumulative environmental and lifestyle factors. Elizabeth's death also prompted reflection on the cumulative consequences of her diet, lifestyle, stress, and environment. As historians and medical scholars have since attempted to reconstruct the final months and years of her life, noting how decades of rich, high-calorie foods, limited, fresh produce, ceremonial fasting, heavy clothing, restricted mobility, and chronic psychological vigilance created a physiological landscape in which vulnerability to infection, organ failure, and systemic decline was heightened. While the cumulative effects of long-term stress, disrupted sleep, and the constant demands of governance likely accelerated age-related decline and contributed to her final weakness, demonstrating how lifestyle, environmental exposure, and psychological factors interact over a lifetime to shape health outcomes, and illustrating the intricate interplay of multiple stressors in the context of early modern medicine. The immediate political and cultural aftermath of Elizabeth's death emphasized both continuity and change. As courtiers and diplomats reconciled grief and loyalty with the necessity of a smooth succession, observing and interpreting the Queen's final state to draw lessons about the fragility of life, the effectiveness of governance, and the limitations of medical care, while also noting the symbolic resonance of her passing, which represented the end of an era and the culmination of both personal resilience and vulnerability, and underscored the inseparability of health, authority, and historical narrative. As Elizabeth's corporeal decline became intertwined with the story of national stability, dynastic transition, and the shifting perceptions of monarchy. In addition, the death of Elizabeth I sparked broader reflection on the nature of health, aging, and mortality among the nobility, as contemporaries and subsequent generations considered the consequences of chronic stress, dietary practices, ceremonial obligation, and environmental exposure on long-term well-being. While the Queen's prolonged rule and relative longevity invited analysis of how extraordinary political acumen and personal discipline could offset, but not entirely prevent, the natural processes of physiological decline, reinforcing lessons about the limits of human resilience and the inevitability of death, even in the most privileged circumstances. Furthermore, Elizabeth's passing left a wealth of documentation for historians, physicians, and scholars to analyze, from letters and ambassador reports to physician notes and court chronicles, providing a multifaceted view of the interaction between lifestyle, environment, psychological pressure, and physical decline, and offering a rare opportunity to study the lived experience of an early modern monarch through the lens of health, diet, stress, and cumulative physiological burden, while simultaneously highlighting the cultural frameworks through which illness, mortality, and authority were understood, interpreted, and communicated in Elizabethan England. In conclusion, the immediate aftermath of Elizabeth I's death serves as a lens through which the intertwined nature of health, political responsibility, social expectation, and historical legacy can be examined, revealing how her final decline reflects both the cumulative effects of physiological and psychological stress and the broader societal and cultural frameworks that shaped understanding of health and mortality, while also setting the stage for the succession of James I and the continuity of the English monarchy, emphasizing how the death of a single high-profile ruler can illuminate the complex interdependencies between personal vulnerability, political exigency, and historical consequence. The death of Elizabeth I in 1603 marked a profound turning point in English history, not only politically, but also in terms of the cultural and medical narratives surrounding the end of a monarch's life, as the sudden yet expected passing of the Virgin Queen brought decades of accumulated political, social, and personal pressures into stark relief. And historians have long examined the intersection of health, lifestyle, and governance to better understand both the circumstances of her decline and the broader implications for her succession and the English state. Elizabeth's passing prompted immediate concern among her court as physicians, attendants, and advisors observed the Queen's frailty with a mixture of alarm and solemnity, noting pallor, weakness, loss of appetite, and fluctuating fevers, while the lack of modern diagnostic tools meant that the precise cause of her death could not be determined, leaving contemporaries to attribute her decline to a combination of age, chronic illness, stress, and possibly supernatural or symbolic interpretations consistent with the beliefs of the time, reflecting how medical knowledge, superstition, and courtly ritual intertwined in the assessment of royal health, with both factual observation and cultural expectation shaping the narrative of mortality. The immediate aftermath also involved careful management of public perception. As the smooth transition to James, they relied on projecting stability, continuity, and divine sanction, while acknowledging the loss of a monarch whose symbolic presence had anchored English identity, religious policy, and international diplomacy for nearly half a century. And in this context, Elizabeth's health prior to death became a subject of both practical and symbolic significance, as her visible frailty, prolonged decline, or sudden symptoms could be interpreted politically, socially, or religiously, highlighting the inseparability of corporeal reality and historical meaning, as well as the importance of the monarch's physical condition in shaping political outcomes. The observation and recording of Elizabeth's final illness also provides insight into Elizabethan medical practices, as physicians relied on humoral theory, pulse examination, purging, herbal remedies, and careful monitoring of diet and rest, while also attempting to anticipate potential crises, demonstrating the combination of empirical observation, traditional theory, and ritualized care that characterized Tudor medicine, yet simultaneously exposing the limitations of these approaches in managing complex, multifactorial health decline, particularly in the context of aging, chronic stress, and cumulative environmental and lifestyle factors. Elizabeth's death also prompted reflection on the cumulative consequences of her diet, lifestyle, stress, and environment, as historians and medical scholars have since attempted to reconstruct the final months and years of her life, noting how decades of rich, high-calorie foods, limited fresh produce, ceremonial fasting, heavy clothing, restricted mobility, and chronic psychological vigilance created a physiological landscape in which vulnerability to infection, organ failure, and systemic decline was heightened, while the cumulative effects of long-term stress, disrupted sleep, and the constant demands of governance likely accelerated age-related decline and contributed to her final weakness, demonstrating how lifestyle, environmental exposure, and psychological factors interact over a lifetime to shape health outcomes, and illustrating the intricate interplay of multiple stressors in the context of early modern medicine. The immediate political and cultural aftermath of Elizabeth's death emphasized both continuity and change, as courtiers and diplomats reconciled grief and loyalty with the necessity of a smooth succession, observing and interpreting the Queen's final state to draw lessons about the fragility of life, the effectiveness of governance, and the limitations of medical care, while also noting the symbolic resonance of her passing, which represented the end of an era and the culmination of both personal resilience and vulnerability, and underscored the inseparability of health, authority, and historical narrative, as Elizabeth's corporeal decline became intertwined with the story of national stability, dynastic transition, and the shifting perceptions of monarchy. In addition, the death of Elizabeth I sparked broader reflection on the nature of health, aging, and mortality among the nobility, as contemporaries and subsequent generations considered the consequences of chronic stress, dietary practices, ceremonial obligation, and environmental exposure on long-term well-being, while the Queen's prolonged rule and relative longevity invited analysis of how extraordinary political acumen and personal discipline could offset, but not entirely prevent, the natural processes of physiological decline, reinforcing lessons about the limits of human resilience and the inevitability of death, even in the most privileged circumstances. Furthermore, Elizabeth's passing left a wealth of documentation for historians, physicians, and scholars to analyze, from letters and ambassador reports to physician notes and court chronicles, providing a multifaceted view of the interaction between lifestyle, environment, psychological pressure, and physical decline, and offering a rare opportunity to study the lived experience of an early modern monarch through the lens of health, diet, stress, and cumulative physiological burden, while simultaneously highlighting the cultural frameworks through which illness, mortality, and authority were understood, interpreted, and communicated in Elizabethan England. In conclusion, the immediate aftermath of Elizabeth I's death serves as a lens through which the intertwined nature of health, political responsibility, social expectation, and historical legacy can be examined, revealing how her final decline reflects both the cumulative effects shaped understanding of health and mortality, while also setting the stage for the succession of James I and the continuity of the English monarchy, emphasizing how the death of a single high-profile ruler can illuminate the complex interdependencies between personal vulnerability, political exigency, and historical consequence. The death of Elizabeth I has long been a subject of both historical curiosity and medical speculation, as scholars, physicians, and biographers have attempted to piece together the complex interplay of lifestyle, diet, environment, stress, and age-related decline that culminated in her final illness. While acknowledging the limitations of contemporary observation and record-keeping, which provide only partial insight into her physiological state, modern analyses often focus on cumulative factors, including the long-term effects of a diet rich in meat, sugar, and salted foods, combined with limited fresh produce, which likely contributed to cardiovascular stress, gout, metabolic imbalance, and organ strain. While ceremonial fasting, irregular meals, and reliance on herbal remedies or purgatives may have created further nutritional instability, illustrating the ways in which long-standing lifestyle choices intersected with physiological vulnerability to influence outcomes in a pre-modern medical context. Chronic stress derived from political responsibility, courtly intrigue, diplomatic obligations, and succession anxiety further compounded her physiological burden, as the sustained activation of stress responses, including elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, impaired digestion, and weakened immunity, produced long-term effects on cardiovascular, endocrine, and nervous systems, a dynamic that contemporary physicians would have interpreted through humoral theory, attributing imbalance to temperament or moral disposition rather than the nuanced interaction of stress, diet, and environmental exposure, while modern retrospective diagnosis must rely on synthesis of historical descriptions, symptom reports, and contextual lifestyle factors. The Queen's environment, including drafty palaces, variable heating, large and poorly ventilated chambers, exposure to seasonal extremes, and the crowded conditions of court life likely contributed to respiratory vulnerability, musculoskeletal strain, and susceptibility to infectious disease, illustrating the interaction of environmental stressors with physiological resilience. While her clothing, including heavy gowns, corsets, and ruffs, restricted mobility, increased fatigue, and impeded circulation, further highlighting the role of daily physical conditions in shaping health outcomes. Physician accounts, letters from attendants, and ambassador reports describe fatigue, pallor, diminished appetite, and occasional fever in her final weeks, suggesting a gradual decline rather than a sudden catastrophic event, a pattern consistent with multifactorial age-related decline compounded by chronic stress, nutritional imbalance, and cumulative exposure to illness, while also aligning with modern understanding of frailty and systemic vulnerability in aging populations, and indicating that her death was likely the result of an intricate combination of physiological and environmental factors rather than a single identifiable cause. Historical speculation has proposed additional possibilities, ranging from infectious disease such as pneumonia or influenza to exacerbations of chronic conditions like kidney or liver disease, gout, or cardiovascular compromise, while some theories even considered poisoning or toxic exposure, reflecting the intrigue and uncertainty of the period. Yet modern consensus generally favors a combination of natural, age-related decline, chronic physiological stress, and cumulative lifestyle effects, illustrating how early modern narratives, rumor, and partial observation can shape long-term interpretation of health events. The integration of contemporary medical theory with historical documentation provides insight into the Elizabethan understanding of illness, as humoral theory guided both diagnosis and treatment, emphasizing balance of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, while prescribing interventions such as bloodletting, purging, herbal tonics, and dietary adjustments, practices that were well-intentioned yet of limited effectiveness, sometimes harmful, and often insufficient to prevent the gradual decline associated with chronic stress, environmental exposure, and age-related organ wear, demonstrating the gap between perceived medical authority and physiological reality. Historians and medical researchers today use these records to reconstruct a holistic picture of Elizabeth's health, considering not only diet and disease, but also lifestyle, ceremonial obligations, environmental exposure, social stress, and the cumulative impact of decades of leadership, creating a nuanced framework for understanding how multiple interacting factors contributed to her decline, while also revealing the interplay between cultural expectation, symbolic performance, and physical vulnerability, as even the most disciplined and resilient ruler was subject to the natural consequences of aging and chronic strain. The broader significance of analyzing Elizabeth's death lies not only in understanding a historical figure's physiology, but also in illuminating early modern conceptions of health, illness, and mortality, as well as the intersection of political authority with personal vulnerability, showing how the pressures of leadership, the demands of courtly life, and the limitations of contemporary medicine-shaped lived experience reinforced social hierarchies and influenced historical narrative, providing a rich and instructive case study for both historians and medical scholars. In conclusion, medical and historical investigations into Elizabeth I's death underscore the multifactorial nature of mortality in the context of prolonged stress, age, lifestyle, and environmental exposure, revealing how diet, ceremonial obligations, chronic vigilance, physical constraints, and psychological load converged to produce physiological vulnerability, while also highlighting the challenges of diagnosing or interpreting historical health events in the absence of modern clinical tools, offering both insight and caution in evaluating the health of historical figures, and emphasizing the enduring relevance of holistic perspectives in understanding how human bodies respond to long-term environmental, social, and psychological pressures, particularly in extraordinary circumstances such as the reign of Elizabeth I.